Hello, this is Margaret Ajibode, the STEM Positive Disruptor. And today on Maya's conversation, I have Emma Collington. And she's the co-founder of STEM with Disabilities, and she's also a PhD student at the University of Waterloo in Canada. The reason why we set up this platform, we want to educate, we want to raise awareness, we want to change people's perception and demystify what STEM is, that science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is about ensuring that our world, our STEM world is inclusive, is accessible, and also the diversity of people that work or are studied within that environment are also showcased as well. And today I have I have Emma on this platform, Maya's conversation, and really, the reason why I wanted her to come on board is because we talk about STEM and we talk about disabilities and people that have disabilities. Some are obvious, are visible disabilities, and some are non-visible. And I want to raise that or educate and raise awareness of that, but also to showcase what's happening in our STEM world through education as well as in the industry as well. And what are the things that we need to do, because there are still issues that are still pertinent, and it should not be the case. Because we've talked about disability, we talk about being inclusive and accessible, but there are people with certain disabilities that are still struggling actually across the board. It's not, so today I have Emma, and she's going to tell us more about it and why she also set up STEM with Disabilities with her friend, but she can tell us more about that. So welcome again, Emma.
Thank you. So my name is Emma Collington. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a PhD student at the University of Waterloo in Ontario, which is in Canada. I'm currently studying molecular genetics. My project specifically looks at parasitic worm genetics and about all the little parasites and things that make us sick. I'm very interested in interesting disease things, and a lot of that comes from having a rare disease myself. From a disability perspective, I have a genetic connective tissue disease, somewhere in the area of mixed connective tissue disease. It's not something that we've fully figured out yet, and that living with that mystery is what has kind of led me to my interest in the mystery of science and all the answers that science actually doesn't have for us. So it's a really interesting field. I have a bachelor's degree in molecular biomedical sciences and psychology, and a master's in molecular genetics and bioinformatics. So I've been in this field for a long time, and that's all at the University of Waterloo. So I've been here for 10 years now, which is
Wow.
it feels kind of nice. So I went into science and biology, and I started my career thinking I was going to be a bench scientist. I was going to have a lab coat and pipettes and all the chemicals and the glassware, and that I was going to be doing experiments. And around the time I was just starting that part of my career, my health deteriorated, and I got a service dog. And between those two things, it was decided that it was not safe for me to be in a lab. And I was pushed out of my lab work and was put on a bioinformatics based project instead. So all computer coding based, which is something at the time I had zero training in, and also not a lot of interest in. Now, I have come to love my project and to make it work. And it really works for me because it's something I can do from home. In hindsight, it was actually a very good decision to move out of the experimental based project, but it was something that was not my decision. And that's something that still sort of haunts me and follows me to this day. So STEM with Disabilities as a project is inspired by my conversations within my faculty and my department at the university, where I often come to them with an issue or something that I need help resolving, and they're not sure how to help me because I'm the first disabled graduate student they've had. And I
Oh.
have sort of two issues with that. One is that disability is so prevalent
Mm,
that I think it's really unlikely I'm the first disabled graduate student they've had.
mm,
I may be the first that's super open about my disability. I may be the first that has a visible disability, but I really don't think I'm the first. And then
mm,
second, if I am the first, there's something really wrong with that. So
mm.
STEM with Disabilities is co-founded by myself and by my friend Samantha Fowler, who's also a PhD student at the University of Waterloo. And it's a visibility project. We're trying to build an international community of people in different STEM fields at all different levels of their career for mentorship, and to have role models in the field, to see people who look like us, who do work like us, and to show that people with disabilities make significant and meaningful contributions to their fields every day.
Yes.
So right now we're a visibility project. We have much sort of longer term visions. We would love to build a database of tips, tricks, hacks, accommodations, things that people do to
Mm-hmm.
facilitate their life in STEM. That's kind of one of our ongoing projects. And just as I wrap up my introduction, one last thing I want to share is that a lot of things in my journey that I talk about, they don't sound very nice. Like I've had a hard time of it. And because of that, I think it's really important that I also acknowledge that there are certain aspects of my journey in which I've been very privileged. First of all, would be the most obvious fact would be that I'm white. And we know that the color of your skin and your race is something that significantly impacts your experience in healthcare and disability, and then also in academia, and by extension of that, STEM. And then second is I come from an academic family. Both my parents are PhDs and are employed, and one of my parents is actually at the same university which I studied
Okay.
at. So I have a lot of sort of inside knowledge as to how academia works in general, and then also as to sort of the policies and how my own institution works. So there's never been a moment where something's happened and I haven't known exactly who to go to or exactly what the policy and the procedure is for that. And that's just because I have so much support from my family on that aspect. And that's something which I am incredibly privileged and thankful for.
Do you know that? Thank you so much. That's so important, having that support network around you. But I just want to go back slightly to your disability. And do you feel now that you could have done lab work, or would it, I don't, I'm trying to understand. The reason why I'm asking this question is that the audience are going to be questioned, but how is that? Because not everyone understands what it
Yeah,
is. And
yeah.
you also mentioned about that not it's still not fully know why. So
Mhm.
could you please explain?
So that's a really good question. So one of my issues is I have dystonia. So I have like an essential tremor in my right hand. So um, handling scientific equipment is something that is not maybe super safe for me.
No, of course.
And also, although I did not necessarily know this at the time, my disability has sort of progressed to a point where I have very few sort of functional or working hours in a day. And if you know anything about STEM, you will know that it's sort of standard. You're in your white lab coat, you're in your lab. My colleagues do this. They're there 12 hours a day. From 8 a.m.
Sure.
till 8 p.m., you're in the lab doing research. And that's just not something that my body can handle. I sleep, 15 hours a day, which sort of precludes the 12 hours in the lab. And then also since the pandemic, I'm someone who's quite severely immunocompromised. So being
Okay.
around other people is it's a risk, and sometimes I take that risk and sometimes I don't. I'm always in a mask. But between that and then also having a service dog, and at the time there wasn't very clear policy as to safety for dogs in lab environments, which is something that my university and a lot of other universities have come really far on in terms of policy and safety in the sort of 8 years in between there.
Mhm.
So, if you had asked me that question 8 years ago, I would have really wanted to push for it and try. And nobody ever asked me, how could we make this work? Like, what could we do to make this safe for you? What could we do, to facilitate your dog being around rather than just sort of cutting me out entirely? Now I have no intention of going back to it. I'm very happy in my bioinformatics.
Mhm.
Um, it's just the sort of idea that point blank, you can't do this. We live in a world now where when you grow up with a disability, you're told never let your disability stop you. Like people with disabilities can do anything that people with regular abilities can. That's kind of the sense you get growing up and seeing, disability role models in the media, right? They're always overcoming their disability and doing what they love anyway.
Mhm.
So it was a bit of a shock getting to university and then being in science and being told point blank, well, you can't do this because of your disability.
It
That
is.
just kind of, it was like running up into a wall. And,
Yeah.
I decided at the time I was doing an honors thesis project, which is what our kind of fourth year capstone project is.
Mhm.
And, I had discussions with my family and my supervisors, and we said, well, let's do this project and get the science out of your system, and then we'll move you to a more accessible field. And then, my project
Okay.
actually went quite well, and I was invited to stay for a master's by two different lab groups, and I ended up being co-supervised. And the master's went really well, but we weren't
Yeah.
sure, and we were like, okay, we'll do the master's, and then, get the science out of your system, and we'll move you to a more accessible field, and do something different. And master's went well. My master's thesis was published very nicely, and was like the cover feature of the journal. We had like illustrations and stuff. It was great. And, I was asked to stay for the PhD. And now, like, I am not getting the science out of my system. Like, my system is
You're
science.
more
So,
hungry, more passionate for it. It's
yeah,
not.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
So, yeah, there have been moments where I have questioned, like, what am I doing? Why am I staying here? When
yeah,
I've had to fight for so much of it. But at the end of the day, biology and science, like, I really love what I do. And
yeah. Thank you. You know what? I applaud you and I celebrate you. I also celebrate your parents because if they were not there to support you, to help you to see that it's easy as possible.
Mhm.
And I do love what your university is doing now because really what I can understand is that it's because they were not educated. They didn't understand. Because they didn't
Mhm.
understand it, because they didn't couldn't be bothered. Not they couldn't be bothered. It's just they've never experienced something like you, and they didn't
Yeah.
know what to do. And so
Mhm.
then the norm is to say, well, I think based on what we know, this is the best option for you. And the fact
Mhm.
that they can actually blatantly say to you that, well, you get science out of you so you can find something else. That's really crazy. That's you doubting people's dreams, and that seems to happen a lot. That people who are excited, they want to try things, and they're stoppers or they're blockages before even the obstacles that they have to cross. And unless you have people who believe in you, people who can
Mhm.
support you, and see that look, the opportunities that you can do it, you would have faded away from it. But I do love the fact that you did your first degree, you did your master's, and now you're doing your PhD. That shows the potential. That shows that you are more than capable, just like any able person. And I'm just thinking though, since because you've been with the university for over 10 years now, or about
Yeah.
10 years plus,
Yes. Yep.
and do you think that if they could have put certain tools in place in the lab environment, would that made a difference? Again, I just trying to understand. The reason I'm asking this, I'm so sorry, I'm prodding here because there's so many people, or there's so many organizations that support disability people with disabilities,
Mhm.
and they don't know what's out there. They don't know what's available. What they
Mhm.
could have done differently, or how can
Yeah.
they and encourage the young people that are coming up or people
Mhm.
with disability if they're
Mhm.
adults. Sorry, I just want.
Yeah, so there's a huge range of accommodations that can be done in labs, and my case is particularly complicated because I have problems handling things. I have allergies to
Yeah,
chemicals.
sure,
I pass
yeah.
out. Like, so if all the money in the world was available, ideally you would have a research assistant or a technician who would be with you and handle the equipment and run the experiments for you.
Mm,
Obviously, that is a significant cost.
of
And in
course.
order to have someone who can do that for you, they have to be as trained on sort of the equipment and the sort of the theory and the biology that they might as well just do the experiments for themselves. So
Sure.
that's the ideal. And there are cases, and we have talked to people through STEM with disabilities who have access to that as an accommodation, sort of a research assistant who does their things. In sort of the absence of that, I don't see lab work ever working for me again. Sort of, I fumbled my way through my undergrad and all my lab courses and I survived them, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was not a pleasant experience. But we have
yeah.
had, through our conversations and our interviews with STEM with disabilities, people tell us just the incredible creative things they have done. We've talked to someone who has sort of turned her career into 3D printing gadgets that help people with disabilities handle
Wow.
their equipment, whether
Wow.
that's pipette openers or
Mm, mm, mm,
things to
mm,
help you close
mm-hmm,
tubes.
mm-hmm.
All she does is design equipment with
Yeah.
3D printing, and she makes that publicly available so that people can create their own products.
Mm,
We've talked to someone with a visual impairment, and people
mm,
generally would think, well, someone who's blind, of course, they can't work in a lab with the chemicals and the glassware. But that's a very narrow understanding of what it means to be blind or to have a visual impairment.
of course,
And
yeah.
what she does is she has fluorescent tape that she has on all of her different glassware and chemicals.
Mm,
And she can see the fluorescent tape. And from sort of practice, she can tell where things are based on the different colors of tape that she can see. So
wow.
we've heard some really creative solutions and
Yeah,
things that people can come up with to sort of
yeah.
allow them to continue to exist and to work in this space.
Yeah. Do
So
you
yeah,
know
it's a
that?
financial problem more than anything else.
Yeah, you're completely right. But I think in a way, the solutions are there. We just need
Oh
to
yeah.
adapt. And there's this,
Yeah.
if you think about it, I mean, I know it's very strange analogy I'm going to use. It's with this Olympics itself. You have the blind or people. They normally have an assist or a
Yes.
support.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you can do it for sports, surely, and you invested there, can't that be also be done or be translated to the academic this world, our industry, through
Hmm.
the education system where you provide support? Because when you think about it, the way we think, everyone thinks different, everyone learns differently. You may
Hmm.
look very, and I think we need to encourage that because disability is not going to go away. It's
Hmm.
out, it's there, and so I think I really appreciate what you guys are doing with STEM with disabilities and having people with examples of what they're doing, how they're being created to enable their life to be their environment to be more inclusive and accessible for them and for others as well. And I think that's so important. So you talked about I mean, well, when you first made your introduction about yourself, you talked about when you couldn't believe that. How come you didn't actually have anybody but you? That's the first person with disability. Is that possible?
Hmm.
But the thing is that I love again is going back to what your parents instilled in you and the fact that you had a parent that works in the
Hmm.
university who also enabled that. I'm not saying that, but we all need a helping hand, even if that's the
Yeah.
case. We all need a helping hand, and also it's because of the relationship you have with your parent and others. They can see the potential and opportunities or the potential of what you can become even though
Hmm.
initially we're a bit reserved as to whether or not this is possible, as
Hmm.
time went on, they saw the potential in it. You didn't just finish your first degree, you
Hmm.
also went on to your second degree, and
Yeah.
now you're doing your third degree, which shows that everything is possible if the environment enables you to, or is conducive to allow you to grow and flourish in so
Hmm.
many ways.
Hmm.
So thank you so much for that. So what would you, because I know the issues are not just, I know that we talk about one type of disability, which is what you're going through.
Hmm.
There are people, your friend itself, she has some form of disability as well. I know
Yeah.
that means that for you to join together, you're saying that there are ways that we have to be in the forefront of making those changes. We have to be the ones to be part of the co-designers, if that's the right term to use, to bring
Hmm.
change into our environment. So what would you say is a way forward? Because really, we can talk about the different disabilities or we can talk about issues which we know are there, but
Hmm.
what would you say is the way forward?
Making disability a normal experience and a normal part of the conversation. The statistics we like to use right now are from the United States, where it's estimated that 1 in 4 people live with some kind of disability. And that could mean a whole bunch of different things, but that it really is, a quarter of the American population. And we can sort of extrapolate that to Canada. We have similar statistics from within our own university saying that, okay, between like 15 and 20% of students identify as having some kind of a disability. So if it's such a normal everyday part of experience, why is it not part of the everyday conversation? And
Mm,
it's a fairly easy thing for me to come by in terms of disclosure because my disability can be very visible. When I'm out in public, I'm wearing a back brace, and that sort of immediately, disabled kid here. I also have a
yeah.
service dog, which is basically a walking embodiment of, this person has special needs or has something
Mm,
different about them that they might need. So
mm,
talking about my disability and sort of sharing with the world that I'm disabled is, first of all, not really a choice I have, and something that I'm extremely comfortable with. And
yeah.
a lot of that also stems from the type of disability I have.
Mm,
Sort of the example I'll give is people love hearing about my experiences as someone with heart disease. I was diagnosed with heart disease at a very young age. I was like 19. I've had significant cardiac events in my 20s, and people love hearing that story. Like, oh, that's so amazing that you've overcome that. As soon as I start talking about like my bowel and bladder function, which, also significantly decreased and which actually caused me a lot more trouble than my heart. No one wants to hear about it, right? Like, oh, maybe don't talk about that part of your disability. So there's this weird stigma that some disabilities are okay to talk about, but others we sort of like hide and are ashamed of.
mm,
And so I'm super open about everything.
yeah.
But also because my disabilities are physical, they're very easy to talk about. There's sort of
Mm,
a huge movement in, dealing with psychiatric disabilities, learning disabilities, neurodivergence, all of those conversations. And I think people with those have uh, I think it's a lot harder for them to open up. And I think they have a lot more fear when it comes to how people are going to react or what people are going to think of them when
yeah,
they share their disability.
yeah.
So, I mean, in that sense, the platform that I have, and when Sam and I do these interviews with people, the first thing we do is we introduce what our disabilities are. We say, this is what I have and this is what I struggle with. And people kind of look at us and say, like, is it okay to say that? Like, is it okay to just include that in my introduction, like the fact that I'm disabled?
Yeah.
So one of the sort of more interesting and radical things we've talked about is now when we introduce ourselves, people share their pronouns. My pronouns are she, her. That's how I prefer to be referred to. Somebody came to us and said, well, what if in our introductions we just describe something like, I'm a person who might need transcriptional software in a meeting, or I might need a little bit of extra time in this. Like, why, when we sort of introduce and present ourselves to the world,
Mm,
why is the disability something we hide?
mm,
And that's something that we're really trying to change, because it's not something to be ashamed of, and it's part of life for everybody. And we have a lot of work being done right now in institutions on what we call EDI in Canada, so like equity,
yeah.
diversity, inclusion. And
That's across the board, everywhere, even in the
yeah,
UK as
yeah,
well. That's the same
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
everybody has slightly different acronyms for it. But
Yeah.
of the groups that are sort of discussed in EDI, the disability is kind of the one that gets, at least in our sort of conversations, it gets kind of pushed to the side. And
Mm,
that seems interesting because the sort of disabled community is the only one of the EDI communities that anyone can become a member of at any time in their lives, whether through
yeah.
illness or accident. People are going to experience disability at some point in
Yeah.
their
Of
lives.
course. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
normal. So
Yeah.
yeah, disability is normal is my
Yeah, do you know, I totally agree with you. I think it's when you make it normal, then it doesn't become an issue. And I think
Mhm,
in a way, it's also about encouraging those people with disability to be upfront about it from the first go, so that if anything happens, then no one's surprised by what's happened in that
mhm,
respect. But also, I think it's also about changing people's perception about what a disabled person it looks like or what
mhm,
they can or cannot do. Because I
mhm,
think in a way, we like our comfort zone. We like to be comfortable.
mhm,
What that defines to be is everyone's individual and how they see that as their comfort zone, and it's
mhm,
changing that. And that's what basically what you're saying is changing people's way of seeing people with disability. That it does
mhm,
just because you have disability does not mean that you cannot do it. Disability is part of it's in our everyday life. Why should we then be ashamed by what who we are? That doesn't make just because we're disabled doesn't mean that we're not human. It just
no,
happens if there's a defect that we are not in control of, but it's happened.
mhm,
And so we need to manage that. But we are also, how do you say, we are strong people. We are people that want to bring change. And we're not separate from society. We are all part of society. And I think that it's really strange, isn't it? It's that changing people's perception. But
mhm,
to do that is to educate and is to raise awareness as well.
mhm,
And bring it to them right in front of their face so that people start thinking differently and doing something about it because we can't complain about something if we ourselves are not doing the change. And what you are saying, because your background is science, my background is engineering. I'm a
mhm,
chartered engineer, mechanical, started with mechanical, but now in IT. But I also know that there's so many tools that are available in the market that sometimes we don't think about how we can adapt and to make it conduce or help to make an
mhm,
environment much more accessible or inclusive. But also, I've had conversations with different people where people, an organization in the UK, they support young people with blindness, and they've never really met anyone with disability that works within our STEM environment. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to showcase because I know the fact that I love your boldness. I want to celebrate. I love what you're doing. I love the fact that you're not going to let anybody stop you from achieving your goals. And then what you have done is prove those people wrong that felt you couldn't achieve anything. Looking at you now, you're doing a PhD. And I also want to celebrate where your parents are concerned because if you didn't have them to support you, if you didn't have them to believe, if they didn't believe in you, and then show that they're believing you, translated into you doing what you're doing now, and others can see that, hold on, you're more than capable. You may have started slow in the sense that not sure of yourself because
Mhm.
people say, oh gosh, what this and that. But now look at you, you're excelling. And I do love that. I love that Emma, you're doing great things. Not only that, you also, as a co-founder of STEM with disabilities, you're also trying to gather and bring hacks or tips on how to make life easier for other people with disability, visible and non-visible disabled people. So I'm so grateful that you can come on board and just have a conversation with me and just to tell us what you're doing from an education perspective, because really I'm hoping that I'll have series of other people talking about their situation in other aspects of STEM itself, because you talk from a
Mhm.
science perspective. So, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you made time to have a conversation with me. I'm so grateful that in spite of what's going on with you, you still make time for others and you're making changes, bringing changes in your environment. But I hope it will translate to other parts of the world as well, because what you're doing is great. What you are trying to achieve is wonderful. And I think people can learn from what you've done in Canada, in your part of the world, because
Mhm.
it's a global thing. We're no longer separate. We're actually quite inclusive where technology is concerned. So why
Mhm.
not share pointers that can bring difference, make a difference in other people's lives as well?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so
I
I mean, disability is something that's often presented as being sort of an individual experience. It's kind of like
mm,
your own trials that you yourself, as sort of one individual, have to overcome, and that it's something sort of very personal. And
yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way. There's a whole community out there of people who have disabilities, and it does
Yeah.
not have to be a lonely or an individual experience at all. It's actually its own culture, and it's a culture that's worth being part of and worth celebrating. One of the things we do with STEM with Disabilities is we ran a conference last year called the Ontario Summit for Students with Disabilities.
Yes, I
And
saw
we
that.
invited students with disabilities from all over Ontario to join us virtually for a free day of events, conversations, chats. We had panels, we had a keynote, and then we had a sort of fishbowl at the end where everyone could discuss just whatever they were interested in. And it was a really interesting space because for a lot of people, they sort of looked, we're in a virtual room, but looked around the virtual room and said, well, this is the first time I've been in a space where not only am I not the only disabled person, but where it's only disabled people. And I had a
Yeah.
similar experience at a conference, and I went to a conference in the United States, again, virtually, where it was the first time I'd ever been in a room where everyone had similar experiences to me. And that's
Mm,
kind of what's so magical about the STEM with Disabilities project is every time we interview someone and
mm,
we hear their stories, it's almost like I'm hearing my story and my experiences coming out of someone
yeah.
else's mouth. And it's so validating. And you
Yeah.
feel so seen. And that's really we're trying to give that sort of feeling of validation and that feeling of being seen to other people because, I'm in my PhD now and I'm super confident with myself as a person with disability and where I've been and where I'm
Mm,
going. And I wish I had felt that way sooner. I
yeah.
wish I'd had that sort of level of confidence in my undergrad. And I was very successful in my undergrad, and so was my co-founder, Sam, but we would
Mm,
not describe ourselves as having been thriving. We
mm,
were successful, but we were unhappy. We did not sort of see ourselves as belonging to the field and as people who
mm,
had futures in the field.
mm.
And I'm still not sure I have a future in the field, but I have a community that backs me up. And
That's true.
that's kind of more important than anything else
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So,
Do you know, I love what you and Sam is doing right. Seriously, I'm so impressed with you. I'm it's really so impressed. I'm not sorry. I hope I don't sound patronized, but I really am. I really am grateful for you, what you're doing, and the fact that you're doing what you're doing, knowing there's a need for it, and it's so important. I hope that what you do, this summit that you have, I hope it's a yearly thing, but you extend it to other people in the parts of the world, and maybe we can make some connection with other people so that again, that's how we start. You start from your own silent little space, and you
Mhm.
and expand the territory. So I'm hoping that what you've done there can be extended to a wider audience across the
Mhm.
globe. So maybe in the UK, I'll make some trying to introduce you to some people that maybe you can all talk about maybe
Absolutely.
doing
Yeah.
something that like that, because I think what you're doing is great.
Mhm.
And we need to be able to share our experiences, but also share ideas about and bring change. Change can only happen when we ourselves are committed to it, and you're committed to it, and there are other people who want to be able to do what you're doing as well, but not sure how to go about it. And if they don't have the right support network around them, it's ever so difficult.
Yeah, I mean,
So
we have really big dreams. So we ran,
yeah.
the Ontario Summit, which is,
Mm,
just sort of one province, but we received emails from students saying, "Well, I'm in Nova Scotia and
mm,
nothing like this exists here. I know I'm not in Ontario, but can I come?"
yeah.
And we absolutely, if the conference resonates with you, then come
Yeah.
to the conference. So
Indeed.
sort of in terms of circles of like what we'd like to do, an Ontario Summit, we're running another one in February. We're very excited for it. But, like
Okay.
the dreams of having maybe a West Coast, an East
Mm,
Coast summit. If we could
yeah.
have a whole cross Canada summit, obviously you start to run into difficulties with time zones. But
Of
our sort of
course. Yeah.
our biggest dream would be to have some kind of web app network online of people with disabilities in STEM from all over the world who could, share their experiences and their advice and, again, their stories, tips, tricks, hacks, accommodations,
Mm,
all the things that help them and get them through. So yeah, a global network is on our radar. We would love to build that. It's just a matter of kind of resources and getting there.
yeah, no, but start somewhere, and the more we promote it, the more you find people get interested. And people like to, people want change, but they don't know there's people with lots of money don't know what to do with it. Maybe they can
Yeah.
hear you and they can invest in what you guys are doing, because it's about spreading the word. And it's this is why we set up this platform. We want to educate, we want to raise awareness, we want to change perception and demystify it, and also
Mhm.
make our environment more inclusive, accessible and
Mhm.
diverse, because we should not be create obstacles if we do have a need, and there are people
Mhm.
who can contribute in different ways but still make it a great environment for everyone as well. So it's about that, and that's what you're doing right now. So
Well, I love the idea of the STEM disruptor. And that was sort of I read your profile and I read about that. And I was thinking about that term because inclusivity of, equity denied groups, it feels so obvious. Like,
yeah.
it, why would that be something you actually have to disrupt to get?
Mm.
But it is.
You
And
have, yeah.
it's worth the disruption.
Totally agree. I do agree. So, well, thank you very much. I'm going to try and make some connection and introduce and see what, again, there's somebody in Australia I think you should meet, connect with
We would
anyway.
love that.
And also in the UK, even the organizations as well. I think they will learn a lot from you, because like
Mhm.
what you're doing in Canada, it resonates with so many people who don't have that support net or the community that they can connect with, and what you're doing. Even if they dip in and out, it's still something, because they'll learn from
Mhm.
you. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you,
well, you
Emma.
can find us on our website, STEM with Disabilities. We're on social media. You can find us on LinkedIn. So people reach out to us from all over, and we love it. So
Great. Well, thank you so much again, Emma. Appreciate you coming on board as well. Again, this is Margaret Ajibade, the STEM Positive Disruptor. And, please, if you enjoyed the conversation we've had, please like, comment, share with your network. Let's spread the word. Let's bring change that we want to see, because we are the change makers, and we are the only ones that can bring those changes that we want to see. Because for our environment to be inclusive and accessible, this is why we have this sort of type of topics, is why we want to bring those changes in a positive way, so that we ourselves can all benefit, because we are good people. We all have potential that we can bring something to the table as well. So again, thank you so much, Emma. Appreciate it. Thank
thank
you.
you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.